as far as I know, the growth of the church initially in Japan was pretty slow. Um, when I was in Yokohama, we lived in some place called Yamate, and that's currently where the Yamate Ward is. And that's kind of a famous ward within the church in Japan because of its historical significance. And there's actually a special exhibit within the church building there that describes the opening of the church, opening of Japan to the gospel. Um, which occurred, I don't know the date at this point, but I know that the dedicatory prayer was done, I think, by Heber J. Grant at the time, who, turned the keys to open the gospel to the land. And so the church, um, 10 or 15 years ago when I was there as a kid, made a big push to repurchase that land that the dedicatory prayer was offered on, because they felt it was very symbolic of the growth of Japan and instrumental to the moving forward of the work there. And so it was one of the most expensive land purchases ever acquired by the church, and one of the most expensive church buildings, just because land is in that particular area of Yokohama, which Yamata is in, is really expensive. Um, but in terms of in my mission in Fukuoka, the work there as well, where the first church building was, it was just some log wooden hut type structure where a few members would meet together. But to symbolize the growth that the church has had there, that's now where the Fukuoka Temple is built upon. And so it went from a small hut to an actual church building to now a full-size temple, which also includes the mission home and the mission offices underneath the Fukuoka Japan Temple. And so within the Fukuoka Japan mission, we're really blessed because we have a temple in the boundaries. One's being built in Sapporo right now, but aside from the one in Fukuoka, which covers the southern part of Japan, it would just be the Tokyo Temple. And so members would have to go to either one of those. And interestingly enough, so Fukuoka would be like here, and then the mainland of Japan would be here, and then Okinawa is down here. And Okinawa is part of the Fukuoka Japan mission, but it's cheaper for them to fly to Tokyo. So the members there actually go and fly to Tokyo to do temple trips, which I think is kind of unusual but interesting as well. It's definitely growing in the sense that there are all those temples being built, and while I was there as a missionary, I really felt like, along with all the changes with the age change and the hastening the work videos produced by the church in an effort to hasten the work of salvation, that we were starting to feel that take movement in Japan as well, and we were able to see the growth in terms of the number of people who were taking active interest in the gospel in Japan. Almost naturally, in the bigger cities, you'll have wards that range from 40 to 160 or so in terms of members that actively come to church every week. But there are many towns which have small branches. The smallest branch I served in was in a place called Kure up in Hiroshima. They would have anywhere between 6 to 20 people, depending on if it was a good week or a bad week. Mainly because one of the families there accounted for 8 of the members, and so if they didn't come, it felt like a lot smaller. But there are also many different small islands within a mission that would maybe get 3 or 4 or 5, and there was just one area that still required missionaries as priesthood holders in leadership roles, such as a branch president or a clerk. But that is a great improvement from before, when most places were actually supported by the missionaries, and there are a lot of missionaries that were being branch presidents or first or second counselors. But now it's fairly self-sustained, and there's a lot of there's steady growth. Unfortunately, there are a lot of inactive members as well, especially from one period in Japan. And if you ask the members about this period in Japan, they aren't too excited to talk about it, because they kind of view it as a dark period of missionary work. And it was actually one of the most statistically successful periods of proselyting in Japan. But the methods, as far as I understand it, were somewhat deceptive and very, very numbers driven. And so that people would be invited over for pool parties, or missionaries wouldn't have to wear proselyting clothes. And so there'd be all these baptisms taking place without the members knowing that they were being baptized. If you can wrap your head around that. And so there's actually a long list of inactive members on the membership rolls in any place that you go to. But if you try visiting them, half the time they won't even know what church you're from, or when you ask them if they were baptized, they have no recollection of what it is you're talking about. And so, as a missionary, that was frustrating at times, because we obviously do things a little differently now in terms of baptismal interviews and making sure that true conversion has taken place before members are baptized into the church. But there's also lots of inactivity just due to the cultural ties that sort of discourage people from being Christian. It's hard to break from tradition, the family tradition of being Buddhist. And then there's this, like anywhere else, family problems or offense being taken by members of the church, or just whatever reason. I think it's universal in terms of why people will stop going to church in Japan. But yeah, that was interesting how there's this whole period where the members don't feel really proud to speak about. And so with the whole To the Rescue thing, we're working on identifying members who really can come back to church, and we've seen lots of progress in that regards, which is cool to see. I don't want to come across as being racially insensitive or culturally insensitive, but I don't know if it was a Japanese member, I think, actually said this, but there's been some studies done that show that the DNA of Japanese people and Jewish people are actually pretty similar. I don't know how true that is, but they kind of tied that into the fact that Japanese people are very by the law, and so they're focused on the points, making sure that all the T's are crossed. Well, they don't have T's in Japan, but yeah. And so compared to the United States, I feel like it's not in a bad sense, but more rigid in the sense of the church flow. It's more by the book, I guess you can say. There's not as much of a spirit of the law type of thing, but it's very word of the law type of thing. But then again, it depends where in Japan you are too. because Okinawa is almost like an entirely different country, in terms of they're actually more similar to like the Pacific Island time, where you show up to church 15, 20, 30 minutes late, and then everybody gets started. And I never got to serve there, but I'd hear stories of missionaries, you know church is supposedly starting at 9 o'clock, but it doesn't start until 9:20 when the bishop arrives, and all the members start trickling in 20 minutes later. So you have a mix of both, and Okinawa is kind of its unique, more island feel to it, whereas the mainland Japan is very structured and orderly.